everybody. Welcome to the Hallmark Podcast. And we're really excited. We're back doing an interview. It's been a little while because of the strikes. But we are talking with an author. We love talking with authors on this podcast. And we're talking with Roseanna White. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. So you're new on the podcast. We like to get a chance to get to know you. So maybe you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started writing.
Sure. So I'm Roseanna. I grew up in the West Virginia, Western Maryland area where the states are kind of all knotted together like that. So I am a wife and a mother of two teenagers, one of which is somehow going to college next week. I don't know how this happened because she's still 8 in my head. But yes, we've been homeschooling since she first entered kindergarten. So that's been a big part of my life. But I've also always been a writer. So I was one of those that when I was, 6 and they taught me how to write a sentence, I started writing stories and there was just no looking back. When I was a kid and you asked me what I wanted to be, it was always, I want to be an archaeologist and a writer or a teacher and a writer. And then eventually I went, who am I kidding? I just want to be a writer. So I just went for it.
Yeah, that's so cool. I actually grew up in Frederick County in Maryland.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know
Very
that
familiar
area
with that area.
really well. Yeah. Well, so how did you always read a lot of particularly historical and romance? Was that always something you were interested in?
Yes. Historical has always been my first love. Probably because at first I read books that were just old, Ella Montgomery, those sorts of things. And it just gave me a love for those eras. So then when I hit middle school, I started reading authors like Lori Wick and Jeanette Oke and all these, people who wrote historical Christian romance. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to write at age 12. So I started writing it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how did you get to the process of that first book getting sold?
Well, it was a long process.
Yeah.
So I wrote my first novel between the ages of 12 and 13. I did eventually sell that novel and it became The Lost Heiress 19 years later.
Oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Never give up on those old stories you love.
Yeah.
But so when I just kept writing all through high school, all through college. And my husband worked in the print shop during college and he was like, I want to start a publishing company and we're going to launch with one of your books. And I was like, wait, no, I'm going to sell my book to a big New York house for $1 million. And he's like, yeah, no, you're not. So he was right. And I didn't. So we launched a publishing company with A Stray Drop of Blood, one of my big old biblical novels. But then I kept seeking other houses to work with too, and eventually sold Love Finds You in Annapolis, Maryland to Summerside Press, which was then bought by Guidepost. And then sold a series to Harvest House and then moved to Bethany House with The Lost Heiress, which was a rewrite of that very first book. So it just took a lot of years and a lot of not giving up. So very tenacious.
Yeah, I love that. That's so cool. So you met your husband pretty young then?
Yeah, we went to middle school together and high school together. That's when we started dating. We went to the same college, got married during college. So yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. And so did he always have an interest in publishing? How did that happen?
Yeah, I remember him in high school saying he wanted to be a publisher someday. He doesn't remember that. He's like, no. It was in the print shop in college. I'm like, no, it was before that. But he's always loved books. He loves story. He loves film, books, anything that tells story. But he's not the one who wants to create the stories. He wants to bring them to life with other people. So yeah, he's always been that whole publishing mindset of let's get these stories out there. Let's help people discover them.
What does he think of your books? Is that I always think that must be a tricky thing for marriage. You have something.
He actually reads all my books before I even turn them in. So he's usually my very first reader and he brainstorms with me. So I love it. He's so encouraging. We'll go for walks and I'll be like, okay, I need to work through this plot point. It's driving me crazy. And he will of course solve it in 2 seconds because he's great at that. But yeah, it has very much become that my characters are part of our life and our family, and we'll be driving down the road and he'd be like, oh man, Whitby would love that. Or can you imagine what Barkley would say to that? And it's they're just part of our world.
Nice. What do your kids think? Have you
My son
writing?
is 15 and could not care less
Yeah.
that I am a novelist.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, whatever, mom, go
Yeah.
write your books.
Sure, Mom.
My daughter is also a novelist. So we write different genres. She likes, fantasy and sci-fi, but she, we have that in common and it's very fun. She's read a couple of mine, but it's just not her genre.
Right.
So
Yeah.
she's like, yeah, I'll read them someday.
That's funny. Yeah. So would you say you're a pantser or a plotter?
A little bit of both. I love being able to write for a while and just discover and, get to know the characters and figure out who they are and where they want to go. But at this point in my career, I'm always turning in a synopsis for approval before I write a book. So I have to know where the story's going in general terms. And at this point, I'm also writing enough books in a year that I have to be able to write them quick. And that requires an outline for me. So I used to be more pantser, plot, discovery writer. And at this point, it's like, no, I'm going to sit down and write a chapter by chapter outline. And then I'm going to more or less maybe stick to it ish. It always changes as you go. But I find that I write way more quickly if I have it plotted out ahead of time.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
I did notice that you had done a bunch of different types of books, different series on your website. That you've done the biblical, you've done Regency, you've done Victorian, Edwardian, you've done contemporary. What makes you drawn to a particular series in particular time?
I mean, in general, I love history. So I am willing to learn and write about any era. Often what has made me choose a particular thing is simply the opportunity that has come along. Like I've had an editor say, hey, could you do a Civil War? And I'm like, yeah, of course I can. Or how about this? I'm like, yeah. Or I came up with an idea that worked as a generational story. So we'll just hit all the major wars,
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've written most in the Edwardian and World War I era at this point, and I have enjoyed that era immensely and love that I know enough of the base foundation now that I can just explore more nuance of it. But I'm also now starting to get into some World War II, and like that's fun too. It's all just great. I just love learning new things and figuring out what it is about an era and a place and a setting that make it unique, that just make them that pop from any other era or setting, and leaning into that and making my characters interact with it is always so much fun.
So what is your research process like? I mean, you said you have eras that you're very familiar with, so maybe you don't need to do as much research, but yeah, how do you kind of go, especially if you have these books set in England, like how do you go about that?
I usually start just with an internet search to figure out what general things I need to know about. And that usually at least tells me what I don't know. So then I'll find some research books, and those are, behind me here. So I usually try to limit it to one or two main resources per subject, for each book. And then to really make it come to life, it's usually things like take Google Map tours or YouTube tours of a place, listen to natives speaking in YouTube videos to figure out the cadence of their speech and what they sound like, how their accent can be described. studying images and maps, and figuring out, what this area looks like and what it is, and reading accounts of it, both historical and contemporary, to figure out, what it's like to move through these places. And then I just bite my nails and get very nervous when someone says, "Oh, I'm from there." And I'm like, "Oh no." So when they then say it was like revisiting an old friend, I'm like, "Okay."
That's yeah, that would make me nervous, that's for sure.
Every single time. Yeah.
I mean, have you gone over there to England?
I've been once. My
Mm.
husband and I decided we'd go over for our 15th anniversary
Nice.
and take the kids, because you can't just not take the kids when you go overseas. So we went, not on our anniversary, a couple months
Homeschool
later.
mom there.
Yeah, right. It was like, it's a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
So yeah, lots of field trips. And so it was when we were actually there when A Lady Unrivaled released, and visited where it was set in the Cotswolds.
Mhm.
And A Name Unknown, which is set in Cornwall,
Yeah.
was in editing at the time. So we went to Cornwall too. And I'm so glad, because I got to see everything I had gotten wrong, because
Yeah.
Cornwall was not anything like I thought it was. So that was really cool.
Well, I mean, I think that would be a major perk of writing, is you could make it a research trip.
Yeah, you can.
I
So
mean,
I can
yeah.
write off my expenses. They can't write off theirs, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would
Totally.
just set every book in like Fiji.
Yeah,
Like,
don't
I
think
just
we
gotta
haven't
go.
talked about it. My husband's like, when are you going to write one set in like Hawaii,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like,
That's right.
yeah.
Yeah. What makes you set a book in America versus Britain?
Usually whatever the story is. So I only have a few set in America, and they're usually because they were about something that caught my interest that is American.
Mhm.
I had the Civil War ones that in the Revolutionary War of 1812 that obviously were American stories. They were about America's first spy ring. And then my most recent one set in America is actually Yesterday's Tides, and it's set on Ocracoke Island in North Carolina. And we vacation in the Outer Banks every year, and this is one of the islands in the Outer Banks. So I actually had this story, and actually I wrote a story 20 years ago set there, and it's just revisited every time we go back down. Like this story pops into my head again. I'm like, oh, I have to do something with this. So I decided, well, it was originally a contemporary. I was like, well, I'm just going to set it in my historical settings, and I'm going to link it to all my worlds. I'm going to plant one of my characters in one of my other series, and then they're just going to have to publish it. And they did. So that was a fun one. It's my same world as my English settings, but set in America. So it kind of pulls it all together. It was a lot of fun.
Is it a challenge writing clean romance and getting that romantic tension and building it and without the intimacy?
It's what I've always done. So it's what I'm most familiar with. And at this point, 30 some books in, it's like, of course, this is how one writes romance. But it can certainly be a challenge to hit the right balance, especially knowing in the clean and wholesome romance community, there are a lot of varying tastes. So I have some who are like, oh, this kiss scene was fantastic. I read it 4 times. And others who are like, well, I had to skim the kiss scene because that was just a little too intense. It's like, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to please everybody.
Right.
But I generally just go for, finding that tension that comes of, really being attracted to someone, even loving someone, but having your own boundaries that you're not willing to cross. And, that is its own tension when, there are the things that one part of you might want and another part doesn't. And it's also just a lot of fun to then focus on the emotions rather than just the physicality, which, is its own tension. So I find that it actually adds, a nice level to the book to have that just part of the native tension.
You have classic novels that you're most sort of drawn to or that are your inspirations?
I have a lot of classics that I love. I already mentioned Ellen Montgomery. I grew up reading her books. My favorite series was the Emily series because it was about a writer and it followed her all the way from childhood into adulthood. So those, I've reread them more recently and was like, oh, this is what I based my whole life on. Like, I just wanted to be Emily. Got it.
Yeah. Well, I guess I didn't think about it. Because Anne's a writer too. So I guess both of her main leads, both of them writers.
Yep. Yeah, big fan. I think I've read all of her stuff. I have the full collection. I love Jane Austen. I have not gotten through Emma yet because when I read it, I kept hearing Clueless in my head. I was like, hey, can't do it right now.
It is her longest book, so
yeah, yeah. But I have all of hers. I've read most of them. Yeah, I studied Shakespeare a lot in college and actually wrote my senior thesis on King Lear. So classics have played a big role in my formation as an author. I don't read them a ton at this point in time, but I have read many, many, many of them.
Yeah, because there's like, of course, Jane Eyre. That's a favorite of mine. I love North and South. Elizabeth Gaskell is one of my, I mean, I love Wives and Daughters and North and South. I think are so good. And you've got to like some of the more approachable Dickens with like Great Expectations, I think is really great. It still manages to surprise me. Like it's such an interesting, weird novel.
It is. I read that one out loud to my kids a couple years ago. And okay, first of all, there's a lot of vocabulary in there that we just don't use anymore. And trying to pronounce it, like reading it silently is fine. Trying to read it out loud, I was like, oh my goodness, I thought I had a good vocabulary. Apparently I don't. But yeah, my kids were like 12 and 9 when I read Great Expectations to them, and they loved it. They were like, read more.
Yeah,
okay, so we are Dickens fans.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say that anything Dickens is underrated. That would be bizarre. But like, I think it's underappreciated how weird that book is.
Yeah, it's
very strange
and really weird. Totally weird. That's probably why my son liked it.
Yeah. So on your website, you say that your writing is a ministry. What do you mean by that?
I feel like writing is the gift God has given me to reach people, to just kind of talk to them about the things that matter in life. So if you sit down with me, like in a public place, not with, the goal of talking about writing, I'm the one who's like quiet and doesn't know what to say. And I'm like, okay, I'll just sit here and wait for someone to talk to me. But when we're talking about books or when I'm writing books, I can talk about anything and I can lay my heart there and I can invite you to open your heart to me. And we can talk about things and especially I love when you frame it in a historical context, you can talk about subjects that are too hard in today's world. I had a book release about the Spanish flu right in the middle of a COVID pandemic. And, that was totally coincidental. But in that world where we're all so exhausted from this pandemic, when you see this other pandemic from 100 years ago and see how people dealt with it and see how hard it was, it's like, oh, that hits home, right? And that's what we can do with historical fiction. It gives us a voice and a way to talk about things. It's just not so head on. It's turned a few degrees, and then it makes it palatable to us. So I really just consider writing my way of connecting with hearts around the world.
Because at least, I mean, I've only read the one book of yours. I didn't think it was like that much of a faith-based read. I mean, it has it has some, but yeah, it must be tricky to know kind of how much of that to include, how to include it, make it not be heavy-handed.
Yeah.
All of that.
Yeah. I mean, my faith is a big part of who I am. So I just put it in the stories in a way that is organic to me. So sometimes that's going to be a little heavier because I'm going to have a character who's dealing with heavy things that they have to get past. And, they turn to faith or discover faith to help them through it. Other times it's really just part of the fabric of their lives. Like it's part of the fabric of my life. So it's not, a big deal. It's just there because for those of us who, do have faith, it's just part of who we are. So that's kind of how I approach it. And it varies depending on the book. So if you picked up A Stray Drop of Blood that is set around the time of Christ and features the crucifixion, resurrection, it's going to be a little more obvious. But, in a beautiful disguise where they're just, people going about their everyday lives, sort of, if you can call their lives everyday lives. It's part of who they are, part of how they were raised, and part of what informs their decisions without being one of their decisions.
Yeah, I like that. I think it should feel like a natural part of the characters as opposed to as opposed to like a Sunday school lesson in disguise.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Never want to be preachy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Today's episode of the podcast is sponsored by WRated, the podcast where we willingly watch the world's worst rated movies. Join me, Daisy.
And me, Claire, as we break down the IMDb Bottom 100, choosing a different film from the list every episode.
We take a deep dive into the plot, production, release, and reviews, usually with a special guest, to uncover if these films are truly as bad as everyone says they are.
You can find us on Spotify, Apple, Good Pods, and anywhere else you find your podcasts.
Well, so you mentioned A Beautiful Disguise. It's a new book coming out. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about the book?
Okay, so the premise is that we have an aristocratic brother and sister sibling duo, Lady Marigold and her brother Yates, who is now Lord Fairfax. When their father died 5 years before the series opens, they discovered that they were basically bankrupt because he'd wasted all the family fortune on entertainments. Now, these entertainments were things like circuses and acrobatic troupes and theater guilds, you know, all coming through and just staying at their house. And so that meant their childhood was a lot of fun because there was just constant distraction going on. But then they discover, okay, we have no more money. So what are we going to do? So they decided to use all those skills they shouldn't have learned from all the circus performers and such and open a private investigation firm. So they are solving cases for the elite by spying on the rest of the elite, and no one knows who they are. They are always in disguise or being very anonymous. So they call themselves the imposters, and they do this so that people think they're like actors pretending to be peers, but they are in fact a lord and lady, and working with their childhood friends. They are now like the elite investigators of society, and that is the premise of the entire series, the Imposter series. So in this particular book, we also then have Sir Merritt Livingston, who is a member of the Coldstream Guard, which we know as the ones who guard the palace. So they're in the red and the black hats, and they stand there all, you know, impassive. But what I didn't realize until I was researching this was that the Coldstream Guards are like the most elite fighting force in England, and they guard the palace because that's the last line of defense before the king. So you need the best to be there. So he's an impressive fella in the military arena, but he had pneumonia and got landed at a desk. So he's actually on desk duty when MI5 is being formed. So this was the first intelligence division that combined the Navy and the Admiralty. The Navy is the Admiralty. The Navy intelligence, the Army intelligence, and police intelligence into one unified group. So he's there for that and starts noticing some very alarming trends and needs help figuring out what's going on and clearing the name of a lord that he is working with. So he has to turn to the imposters for help. So there we go. We have our hero and our heroine who are kind of forced together through a case, and lots of adventure ensues.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. How did you get this idea?
Interestingly, the concept for the series came in a dream, which does not usually happen. But I woke up with this idea of this dream where there were investigators. It was Edwardian. They were called the imposters, but they were aristocrats. And I was like, oh, that's fun. I'll just jot that down randomly. But I had no plot to go along with it.
Yeah.
Then a year or so later, I had this idea for a heroine who used high fashion as a disguise. And I was like, I could totally pair that with that other idea. And then it was just like, okay, well, I need something to make that really interesting, give them some odd skills. What if they were like trained by circus performers? That'd be so crazy. That'd be a ton of fun. And so then I just started researching other things I could pull in, and there we go. I don't know. Crazy mind.
So you actually had in the dream, it said the imposters.
The imposters.
Nice.
Yes.
That is really funny.
Yep.
You were watching a lot of Downton Abbey the night before.
I don't know what it was. Whoever knows where we get the things we get, but
that's really fun. And so how did you come up with Marigold as a character?
In part, I had this idea where I was like, okay, what I think in this one, I looked over and saw my hat collection, because I have a tea party hat that's gigantic and has all the feathers and stuff. And then I have my normal like beach hats and stuff. And I was like, oh, hats, people wearing many hats. I'm like, I should have like the many hats of Lady someone or another. And, she could totally be like hiding behind her wardrobe. And then I was like, oh, and what if it's, someone who's just average looking? And when you put someone average looking in these extravagant styles, you don't see them, you see the styles, and you're like, oh my goodness, that's just, I can't see you beyond your hat. I'm like, that's a great disguise for an investigator. Okay, so we're going to lean into that. So Lady Marigold, I decided would create these incredible fashions and set tongues ablaze with that. But she deliberately chooses styles that overshadow her so that people aren't looking at her. They're looking at her hat or her dress, and that's all they ever see, which then means her hat can be somewhere else. And they assume that's where Lady Marigold is while she's off doing something investigative that might require an alibi. So,
well, it's kind of similar. You think of like the Scarlet Pimpernel, kind of like that high fashion obfuscated the fact that they were doing all this stuff. So it kind of distracts.
Oh yeah. It's amazing what you can hide behind the right costume.
Yeah. It's funny. Yeah. So had you written mysteries before?
I've written a lot of my historicals have either a little suspense or mystery thread in them. They're not usually true mysteries. It's not a whodunit most of the time. It's just more of a suspenseful sort of thing. I have written some true mysteries for guideposts those are my contemporaries. So those like follow the mystery formula, and it is so not my normal genre. So I'm always like, oh, I'll do this. And they're like, yeah, don't forget that you should have a villain. I'm like, oh, right. Yeah. Bad guy. Okay. Yeah.
There's gotta be a murderer. Yeah. Was that hard? Like keeping all the clues, that they're investigating and making it all, track and make sense and work and everything.
Oh yes. I reworked all of that stuff quite a few times in this one. I started out like I knew where I wanted to end up, and I would put something and then I'm like, no, that doesn't work. No, that has to be revealed later. And so I'd move things around. And actually when I first turned the manuscript in, there was a different villain than what we ended up with. And I was like, that's just too straight a line. That doesn't work. So my editors were like, I don't like the end scene. I'm like, I don't like the whole villain line. I'm just going to change the whole thing. So I did. And they were very surprised when I turned it back in. And they're like, whoa, the villain changed. It's like, yeah, I wanted to surprise you with
that's
that.
a big
I wasn't
change.
going to tell you. So
yeah. So with Merit, Lord Merit, is he different than some of the other leads that you've written? Was he something new?
Yeah, I mean, I've written some military heroes before, and I've written, upper class heroes plenty of times, but he was an interesting combination because he has that very noble spirit that led him into the life he's chosen. And he is very driven by that sense of nobility and responsibility and duty. He wants to, do the right thing all the time. But he was also he had levels that other heroes haven't necessarily had. I loved developing his family life because he is the presumed heir to an earl, but it's his uncle. So his aunt could have another child at any minute, maybe, and it could be a son and he could be out. So he's really trying not to take that for granted and to appreciate his family for who they are and love them for who they are and not think too much about what it may eventually give him. So it was a chance to explore that kind of oddity of English heirs and inheritance rules that his cousins who are girls cannot inherit because of the entail on the estate. So he is the one standing to get it all. And he feels guilty about that. Like, why should I? But it's theirs. It should be theirs. So that was fun to explore.
When you're writing, do you have actors that you imagine in the roles?
I often look up actors or models and then pin them to a Pinterest board so that I can show my cover design team what I have in mind. So sometimes they're actors, sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's just random people I see on Pinterest or something, have no idea who they are, but it's like, oh yeah, he looks about right. So,
did you have anybody on your board for Marigold and Merit?
I don't honestly remember their names. So once I'm looking it up while I'm talking here. Let's see. There we go. So let's see, clicking on my characters, and you're all welcome to go look. It's pinterest.com/Roseanna M. White. I have words for all my characters. So Merit is Max Lloyd Jones, who is an English actor. He's blonde and has very striking blue eyes. So yeah, he totally fit the bill. And I do pick these out before I start writing so that I can go to the pictures and describe them as the actors actually look. And
I can see that. He actually did one Hallmark movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yep. And Amelia Jones was my pick for Lady Marigold. So she has, lovely brown eyes, soft features, brown hair. Yep.
That's funny. They have the
There
same
we go.
last name.
I know. She wouldn't have to change her name if she.
There you go. That's fun. I don't know. I pictured somebody with red hair. Why did I? Is it Six Shift red hair? I can't remember. But yeah, I think like an Alicia Witt, I think would be fun. Yeah, that would be good. But I bet that's like an exciting thing to kind of see how these characters kind of evolve and change as you write, and as seeing Marigold kind of grow as a person in confidence as she, because she's not somebody who expected to like have a career really. But here she finds this thing that she's actually good at. Yeah. So it's fun to see her journey as a character. And like the relationship between Merit and Marigold is fun.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun because Lady Marigold has no dowry. So she just assumes marriage is off the table. So I'm just going to annoy my brother for the rest of my life and that'll be fine. But of course, this is a romance novel. So when she meets Sir Merit, he has this way of seeing her when he shouldn't, when she's in disguise, or seeing things about her that no one else has ever noticed. And he soon realizes that, these horrible hats she wears are hiding something. And what is it? And why is she hiding it? So it was fun to, help them both realize that the assumptions they make about their own lives don't have to be their life story, and they can choose something different.
Now, you said this can be a series of imposter novels. So are they going to be sort of spin-offs in the style of rom-com? I mean, romance novels?
Each one will be their own hero and heroine. So book 2 is called A Noble Scheme, and it's about two characters we meet in book 1, Gemma and Graham. They are our other 2 members of the imposters team. And you know in book 1 that they are at odds, but you don't know why. And we discover that in book 2.
That sounds fun.
And they go off to rescue a kidnapped child. And then book 3 is about Yates, who is Lady Marigold's little enormous brother. And so he gets to take the stage in book 3. And he's been clamoring to the whole time because he has a point of view. He has scenes from his point of view in both of the previous books. So he's been banging at the door the whole time going, hey, this is my story. It's all my story. So he finally
that's the best in romance novels, because and I don't know why they haven't really latched onto that in the rom-com world, because they're always struggling with sequels. How do you do a sequel in the world of Hallmark? Because once the couple's together, like, what do you do? Right. Like, what else is, you can have a wedding, but I don't know, it's just usually the sequels are terrible. But like doing this, I don't even know what you call it. It's not really spin-off, but like this format that romance novels have, where you take a minor character, then you make them the main character of the next book. It works so well. And I wish that the movies would do this.
I totally agree. We call them a standalone series. So, there's something to unite them, but each book is its own love story. And, I think it's a fabulous format because I'm all about the really romance too. So it's like, no, I need the next love story. That's what we need.
Right. Yeah. Because you don't want you want to learn more about our characters, but you certainly don't want them to break up.
Right.
That's the worst. And so you can have them have like a baby, or you can have them, a big wedding movie, but those usually are awful. It's the way to go.
That needs to be the subplot of someone else's romance. So that's what we do. We work the weddings and the babies into the next books while we're focused on someone else. Yeah.
Well, it's a lot of fun. It's creative. It's something different. I think people will enjoy the book. And it's, when does it officially come out?
August 22nd.
August 22nd. Well, very exciting.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, hearty, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
I'd like to end our interviews with some fun, get to know you questions.
Cool.
So our first one is, what is the best ice cream flavor?
I am such an ice cream fan. My traditional favorite is mint chocolate chip, but I love cookies and cream with peanut butter swirled in. And if I'm going out, like to, Dairy Queen or the like, I like a chocolate blizzard with peanut butter cups in it. So yeah.
Solid. Yeah, that's good. Like peanut butter just makes everything better.
And when you combine it with chocolate, it's just a match made in heaven.
Good. So good. All right. What is your favorite color?
Purple.
Yeah, mine
But
too.
you can see if you look at anything that I own, it's all purple. If you buy books from my shop, they come in a purple envelope. I mean, I'm not subtle. It's purple.
Okay. What music are you into right now?
I'm a classical fan, so I just turn on Sirius XM's classical station and just let it do its thing all the time.
Good. Okay. What is your go-to date night food?
Well, just last night we went out for Mexican, so you just can't beat that. Or pizza. We have a place that does wood fire pizzas, so we'll do that for date night too.
That sounds good.
Not like Domino's, but
right. Classy.
Special pizza.
Well, I mean, pizza is one of those, I think pizza and ice cream are one of those, both foods that like, you can have fancy pizza and ice cream. You can have really cheap pizza and ice cream, and it's just good.
Yep, I
the
agree.
Whole spectrum.
They're great. All of it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. What is your go-to date night activity if you're going out doing something?
Usually we're just boring and just go out to dinner. Once in a while, we'll go see a movie. So last night we went to see Barbie. That was fun.
What'd you think?
I had a lot of fun watching it. And my husband was like, I'd watch it again. Let's go. Let's go back.
I love that. That's so good. I've seen a lot of men really enjoy Barbie, which I am very excited about. Yeah. All right. Which do you like better, dogs or cats?
I'm a cat person.
Not many cat people out there.
Yep.
Yeah. We always say cats, you have to earn their love.
Yeah. I've discovered that
important.
because my husband and I both work from home and we homeschool, so we're there all the time. So the cats had no choice but to be loving and affectionate because we were in their territory constantly. So we have very cuddly cats.
Oh, all right. Which do you like better, beaches or mountains?
I live in the mountains, so I choose the beach when I can go somewhere.
All right. What is your favorite holiday to celebrate?
Easter.
Oh.
Yeah, it's less commercial than Christmas, but it's just total joy. It's just all about the joy.
An underrated candy holiday. Really good Easter candy.
Yeah.
I love that. The jelly beans and I love speaking of chocolate and peanut butter, particularly the Reeses eggs.
Oh yeah.
They are better than regular Reeses.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I now have to order all my kids Easter basket candy from England because they like English chocolate. We spoiled them. We took them to England. So now they're like, English chocolate's the best. So I have to order like Cadbury chocolate that's actually from England. Yeah.
That's funny. All right. What is your favorite Hallmark or romantic movie?
Oh gosh. This is a stupidly hard one because most of the time when I'm watching movies, it's with my husband. So we pick something we'll both enjoy.
Now Barbie.
It's been a while. I don't know that that's a romantic movie. I'm trying to think of the last
that's true.
romance we've seen, but I'm drawing a blank. this is horrible.
Well, are you more of a classic movie fan or a like more contemporary?
I've watched both. I went through a phase where I like watched all the old movies. So if it had Audrey Hepburn or Cary Grant in it, I have seen it, I promise.
Yeah.
So I loved all of those. And so now we tend to watch things that are more like suspense or, that sort of thing with the family, or sci-fi because the kids will enjoy it. So it's been a while since I've just watched a good romance.
Yeah, I need to get on that.
I do. I should ask you for a list of recommendations. That's what I should do.
I'll do it. I'll send it to you. Well, very good. You passed the test. You answered all the questions. Very good.
I think I failed that last one, but I read a lot of romantic books.
I guess since you haven't finished the book, did you watch the most recent version of Emma?
I have watched them. Yes. Those are all delightful.
Oh, so good. So good. Well, very good. Thanks so much for coming on and talking with us. It was a lot of fun. And if people want to follow you, social media, your website, all that stuff, how do they do that?
Everything is Roseanna M. White. So RoseannaMWhite.com is my website, and it's at Roseanna M. White at all the big social media platforms. You are welcome to sign up for my newsletter. You get a free read when you do so, and then you get all my news. And I have special segments just for newsletter subscribers, and you get first glance at all the cover reveals and all that fun stuff. So that's the main way I communicate. I send out a weekly email, and you get a peek into my world.
Great. Well, we will have those links in the description. You should definitely check it out. And we'll have an affiliate link as well to the book. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. Also, make sure following the podcast, Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. That really helps us a lot. And if you're watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have our Patreon group and merch store, so check that out. And thanks so much. It was so great to meet you, and congratulations on the new book. It's very exciting.
Thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
All right. Bye, everyone.